You have found Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumphant successes of business owners across the land, coming to you wherever you are so that you can learn all that you can with just a little bit of time and a great guest. My name is James Kademan, entrepreneur, author, speaker, and helpful coach to small business owners across the country. And today we're welcoming / preparing to learn another great business owner for you to learn from.
That kind of format, for decades they've been telling us everyone has a short attention span and they can't do this and that. Mm-hmm. And with what just happened, he left, he's leaving YouTube. And
I was wondering what's going on there. If he's leaving it
he's leaving YouTube at some point. I think in December of this year, he's going to be off YouTube altogether. Right now, I think he's running back and forth. And what's the
Spotify,
music? Spotify,
right.
yes,
Is
it is
Spotify?
Spotify. Yeah,
Okay.
so he signed a big deal with them.
It was $100 million.
Yeah, he gets to keep control of his company. But what he's trying to avoid is that YouTube and Patreon and a bunch of the other platforms are basically controlling what type of content people can put out.
Really?
And demonetizing everything.
Oh.
I
can see that. Sure.
So if you do something that they consider to be controversial or that goes against the kind of editorial board's political slant, then that gets demonetized.
Yeah, interesting.
And so that's I think one of the big reasons he left. Is moving over to Spotify.
Sure, I can see that. It's weird when you see, like you talk about Facebook pulling stuff, Twitter pulling stuff. Like, oh, that's a slippery, messy slope, right?
Well, and unfortunately, that's, with cancel culture and things like that, that's where we're at now, is free speech as long as you agree with me.
Right.
Which is not close to what it should be.
No. No.
Famous quote, and I can't remember who said it, I may disagree with what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it.
Sure. Right.
And that, that's what free speech is. People are going to disagree with you. You're going to disagree with others, but they have a right to say what they say.
Absolutely.
I teach government.
Oh, really? Okay.
So one of the things I always talk about when we're talking about free speech and we're talking about the Bill of Rights is what happened in Skokie, Illinois in the 70s, where the neo-Nazis wanted to march.
Oh.
And they were given a protest or parade permit by the city of Skokie. Skokie, Illinois at that time was like 80% Jewish. And many of the residents were children of Holocaust survivors.
Okay. So not big fans.
So they chose that city on purpose.
Sure.
And I disagree with their message. But I think, the courts bore out that it was the right thing. They were doing things legally. They applied for their permit. They paid for their permit. It remained peaceful, And you talk about peaceful protests today. It
got weird. Yeah, it's interesting how certain companies are so big and they're huge channels to say stuff, but when you start giving them the power, or you allow them to use that power to clip people, that's a mess. Because you may say now, okay, I don't want those Nazis to speak. What's to say that when another group comes up, you're like, hey, why are you quieting them down?
Right, and that's the whole thing. It's fine when it's people on the other side of the aisle.
Yeah.
But when then it comes around to your side of the aisle.
Right. I didn't mean that.
Right. Well, the whole cancel culture. Look at the mess that Ellen DeGeneres is in right now.
So I have to apologize because I don't really pay attention to news like maybe I should. It's gotten...
Well, apparently there was a atmosphere of, intimidation and like the people that were running her show in the background. I mean, if you were late, you were punished, but not punished in a normal way.
As an
you were
employee?
ostracized. Yeah. I mean, I've read a couple articles and just briefly looked at it, and it just seems like I don't know if she was aware of everything, but someone was a tyrant and treating people horribly. Intimidation, harassment. And so now people are calling for her head on a platter.
Ellen.
And yes, who was,
She's like the equivalent to Oprah.
Right.
Maybe not equivalent, but she's also popular amongst people.
That's cancel culture. They're always going to look for someone new to take to task.
That one thing.
And if they disagree with them,
I always joke with my buddies, like in 20 years, who is going to be able to run for president?
Right. Well, what I always talk to my class about is, When I was a kid, my dad was born in 1930.
Okay.
And so he grew up listening to the radio and Jack Armstrong, the all-American boy, and anybody can grow up to be president. And that was something to be sought after. Okay, now, I mean, look at how much CEOs are making.
Lots.
Would you rather be the executive vice president of a company that's profitable and make $12 million a year or $13 million a year and not have everybody in your business? Or would you rather be president of the United States and make $500,000 a year and have half the country hate you at any given moment, have everybody look through your entire closet to see if there's any skeletons, have everybody second guessing every decision you make, any kind of message that you give? I mean, my question now is, who wants that job?
Right.
And if you look at the candidates now, are we getting the best representatives of the best people in the country?
I hope not. Jesus, I hope not.
I mean, if you look at the last two elections, it's definitely been, people are trying to choose the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, even further back than that, right?
Yeah,
It's bizarre. I was just talking with someone a week ago about how you almost have to be financially independent in order to even run.
Right.
Like the cost of running is insane.
Well, we go through campaign costs in my class, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, the travel expenses and the media expenses are unbelievable, and your average person
couldn't touch it.
Couldn't do it.
Wouldn't even know where to start.
No.
Right?
You'd never be able to do it. And so then you've got these massive donors, and I know donations are limited, but when you've got enough money, you can set up, funding
Super
organizations
PACs
and then, skirt around those.
Yeah.
So it's
just the advertising campaigns alone. I'm like, how much money is flowing through here?
Right. I mean, and we're not even there yet, and it's already starting to get, ridiculous. Wait until September, October.
Yeah.
And every time you turn on over-the-air radio, every time you turn on regular television, any kind of computer search engine and social media, the ads are just going to be prevalent.
Just inundate?
Yep. Yeah, you're not going to get away from it.
Trying to convince you of something.
Yeah. So
it's weird. Signs in the yard we see. We just stayed at a cabin a couple weeks ago. And like every cabin has got their little flag running. Like, oh, come on. We're here to relax, man.
I'm not a big yard sign or bumper sticker guy. I know there are people that are, and if you want to share your opinions, that's fantastic. But especially at teaching government, I've got to try to show both sides.
Right.
And that's been a trick. I teach in Watertown, which is in, the high schools in Jefferson County.
Okay.
Jefferson County is super conservative.
Okay.
As far as teachers go, I'm probably a little more conservative than most.
Sure.
But I always try to show both sides. Try not to favor one side. And as I tell parents that come in the beginning of the year, my job is to teach your kids how to think, not what to think.
Right. That's smart.
That's
probably tough.
Yeah, it's difficult, because everyone has their own biases, and they might creep in from time to time. But
whether you realize it or not,
you have to try to present the other side in an as rational, intelligent way as possible.
So let's talk about your business, because for the people that we just started talking. This is the best part. So Steve Schleicher, is that right?
Correct.
All right. So on camera and voice talent. So you're also a teacher.
Yes.
So when did you decide to do the on-camera and voice talent?
I had been acting since I was a kid. A pretty introverted kid, pretty small as a kid.
Okay.
And but I had a friend who was a really good athlete, and we'd walk to school to junior high every day and back. And one day he comes to my locker in the middle of the day and says, "Hey, I'm not going to walk home with you." I'm like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm trying out for a play." I'm like, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, you should do it." I'm like, "Really? Me? Come on."
All right.
He talked me into it because he said, he named a bunch of kids. He was a year older than me, and he named a bunch of 8th graders that were trying out, and they were all pretty cool guys and kind of an eclectic group of people.
Sure.
People that were athletes and people that were in music, and I'm like, oh, okay. So he dragged me along, and I went, and I got a part. And when we performed the play, I absolutely loved it. It was fantastic.
Nice.
I played a little nerd in Up the Down Staircase, Harry Kagan, and I basically was the straight man for the guy who was really funny. The guy who's really funny's name was Andy Wallman, who now runs KW2 in Madison.
Really?
Yeah, and when we
Wow.
would give our lines back and forth, and the crowd would roar, I mean, that was something. I had never experienced that before. I'm like, wow. So I continued to act all the way through high school, and then afterward I did some community theater and had gone back and forth. But about 5 years ago, I was trolling around on Netflix looking for something to watch, and a documentary popped up called I Know That Voice.
Oh.
And I Know That Voice is about all the big-time voice actors for animation.
Okay.
You know, the voice of Winnie the Pooh and Tigger and
sure.
SpongeBob and Fred Flintstone. And so, you know, Futurama, The Simpsons. So I watched that, and two things struck me. One, they look like they're having a really good time. And two, I think I might be able to do that.
Nice.
And so I looked at it. I had been teaching for years at that point, and I always did stupid voices and accents in front of the room. And, you know, I was kind of on the edutainment bandwagon before there was a bandwagon, because
Sure.
I realized if kids are not involved, if you've not built any rapport with them, then you're not going to be able to teach them.
Oh, snooze fest.
You know, you could
Yeah.
have the greatest knowledge about a subject on the planet, but if you can't relay it to teenagers, you're not going to get anywhere.
Especially with history, right? Because they're
Yes.
going to be like,
Yes, exactly.
bore me to tears here.
So, and that I think is my biggest strength as a teacher. So I thought, you know, I might be able to do this. So I started searching, you know, gathering as much information as I could. And I found a company in Milwaukee called Voiceover Nation.
Okay.
Dave Redeman is one of the co-founders, and his background is in advertising. He's the director of Redeman Creative. He has written copy. He has directed commercials. That's his background. The other guy's name is David Connor, and he's a sound engineer and a voice actor. Right now, he is in charge of all audio and music for the Home Shopping Network. He lives down outside of Tampa.
Wow.
And so those two guys had come together, and it came out of necessity, because David Connor was an engineer in Milwaukee at the time, and Dave Redeman was creative at the time, and they were trying to find people to do voiceover for their various campaigns, and they found a lot of people just didn't know what they were doing in the Milwaukee market.
Really?
So they decided, we're going to build a curriculum. We're going to teach people how to do voiceover. And I had looked at a bunch of online stuff. I had looked at, you know, other places to go. And this was inviting to me because, one, it was in Milwaukee, so it was only 45 minutes away from
Sure.
the house. Two, it's an in-person class. You know, as we've all found with what has happened in the last
Right.
7 months, Zoom meetings are great. Virtual is good, but it's just not the same as being in
No,
person.
I tell people it's the difference between sex and porn.
Especially since, you know, half the time there's a person, and it's usually me, that can't figure out how to unmute their mic. And so,
All right.
can you see me now?
Yeah, right? Whose cat
so,
is that?
So I decided to sign up for their class. The other great part about their Essentials of Voiceover class was there's only 3 students at a time.
Wow, okay.
So I drive there the first night that we are having class. We're at a professional recording studio in Milwaukee. Within the first 5 minutes, I'm in the booth reading on a $3,000 microphone, you know, and these guys are giving me tips and hints on, hey, try this, try this. Okay, you did this, but let's look at this, look at the copy, let's break the copy down.
Wow.
And so I went through that class. I decided at that point to get a demo made. If you're going to do voiceover, you need a demo. Almost everyone starts with a commercial demo, so I had them cut my commercial demo. Once I had my commercial demo in hand, then I started to submit to agencies.
Okay.
And so I submitted to various agencies.
These are advertising agencies.
Advertising agencies. Well, no, talent agencies.
Okay. Talent agencies.
Yes, talent
Okay.
agencies.
And then they go to
Yeah.
advertising agencies?
Yes. Some advertising agencies you can go directly. I mentioned KW2 earlier, Andy Wallman. I've done 3 or 4 gigs for him. He knows who I am. We know each other. He was actually one of the first guys. Once I decided to get into voiceover, he was one of the first guys I called. And I said, hey, I know we haven't talked in a long time. We had been in probably 8 or 9 different plays together throughout junior high and high school.
Okay.
You know, we knew each other. And I said, here's what I'm doing. you have a better idea of how this stuff works than I do. Can you give me a hand? So we sat down and had a couple of drinks, and he gave me a list of names. Contact this person and this person, and hey, I think you can learn something from them and them. And that's what it is. It's just a huge learning curve in the beginning.
That's incredible.
So I ended up getting my first talent agent, a Milwaukee agency that I am no longer represented by. But having that first agent kind of must have made me more attractive to other agencies, because then I picked up another agent and another agent and another agent. And so I've got, I want to say 6 agencies right now.
Wow.
Throughout the United States, and one in Auckland, New Zealand. And they will they will send me auditions. As I rolled up, I had just gotten a notification. There was a rush call for my agent who is in the Baltimore area. But it was for bilingual Spanish and English, and I don't habla español, so
gotcha, okay.
I was out of luck.
Sure.
But so I get auditions from them. Once I was working, and I had this talent agent. A friend of mine who had gone through the same class before he appeared on a TV commercial, and I contacted him. I said, "Hey, how did you do that? You're on a TV commercial. Did you act before you started doing voiceover?" He goes, "Never acted in my life." He said they saw my picture when they were in the agency, and they said, "Yeah, we want that guy." And I'm like, "Well, I've acted." He goes, "Well, talk to your agent and see what's going on." So I went in and talked to my agent. Shortly after that, she goes, "Oh, I didn't know you were on camera," and so I ended up getting a Steinhoffel's ad.
Nice.
Where I played a construction worker,
sure.
Because that's what I do. And then after the Steinhoffel's ad, I thought, well, I really want to kind of explore this on-camera stuff. So there was a Facebook group for actors in Wisconsin, and a guy by the name of Robert Love posted that he was going to shoot a movie and, needed some actors. So I contacted him. I looked Robert Love up. Robert Love is one of the voice directors for Raven Software.
Oh.
So Raven Software, Call of Duty, a bunch of the Marvel games. And I thought this might be a pretty good guy to know if you want to be a voice actor.
Doesn't hurt.
So I contacted him, and he goes, "Okay, we're going to have a Skype audition." And the movie is very interesting, and he wanted me to do a couple different characters, and I did those, and we got to the end of the audition. He said, "Is there anything that any other questions you have for me?" I said, "Not a question, but a comment." I said, "I'm a little mad at myself. I wish I would have contacted you a couple of weeks earlier, because the parts that I tried out for were not really the part that I wanted. The part that I want is that Russian guy. That's the part. It's a Russian mafia guy." And he's like, "Wow, well, you got a pretty good look for that." He goes, "Do you do a Russian accent?" Of course I said yes, but the only Russian accent I had done was in front of class when we would talk about the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, That was the only time I had done it. So he goes, "Well, take a look at the script, and I'll give you a minute." And then, so I have 1 minute now to look at the script, to figure out my Russian accent, and to get rolling. So I did it, and when I was done with the audition, he goes, "Wow." He goes, "Now you gave me something to think about." He goes, I'll be in touch in a couple days. So he contacted me 2 days later and said, "You got the part. You're going to be the Russian guy."
Nice.
So my wife thinks it's funny because at the time I was probably 50 or 51, kind of a late bloomer. I learned how to ride a motorcycle at 47.
Nice.
I decided I was going to
be a voice. As long as you do it, man.
I was deciding I was going to be a voice actor at 50, and now I'm going to be an on-camera actor at 51. So I packed my truck up. We're going to film in Middleton. So I drive to Middleton. I show up on set. I know nobody. I got the director there, and we did that. And so I got to play Zerkan Slejonovic in independent film, short film called The Chronicles of Samantha Derringer. And it was really cool. It was so much fun. I had a really good time. Creative people. There were a bunch of 20-something people on the set who were all really cool, very nice people, good actors, a lot of talent. So I thought, this is something I'm going to try to work at. So that summer I found another one, similar situation. I sent my reel. I had put together a little bit of an acting reel at that point, and so I sent it to a guy up in the Green Bay area, and they decided they were filming a movie in Oshkosh. So in one day we filmed a short film called Hole Card, which is about mafia guys sitting around a poker table playing poker, and I got to play the New Jersey mafia guy that came into Milwaukee to talk to the podunks in Milwaukee about how they should be running their business. Spoiler alert, I get shot and killed. So, so I just started picking up more on-camera stuff.
Sure.
And then I've done a couple. Story First Media in Madison was doing an industrial, and they wanted for Hooper Power, which is an electrical utility. So they said they had posted something that said looking for grizzled kind of, electrical foreman, for an industrial video. So I sent an email to Dave Nielsen and said, I think I could do this. Here's a picture of me. Here's a clip of me doing something else. My dad worked for Wisconsin We Energies, which was Wisconsin Electric Power for 38 years. He was a line crew leader, a foreman. I think I probably have a pretty good idea of what you're looking for.
Yeah.
What do you think? So he sent me sides for an audition. I did the audition, sent it to him, and he goes, "You got it." So I went there and filmed that. I actually can put hand model on my resume.
Really?
My agent that I picked up in Green Bay was sending out things and said, looking for a hand model, guys, 30 to 50, working hands. Now, I'm a teacher. I really don't have working hands.
They're so soft.
But I took pictures of them, and apparently they were gnarly enough, but not too gnarly.
All right.
So Georgia Pacific was doing a short video on their industrial hand cleaner.
Wow.
And so I went up and I was Joe. They gave me the Georgia Pacific shirt that said Joe on it, and I got to wash my hands about 10 times and compare their product with a product from another company.
Nice.
So I did that. So I have been a hand model. So I just started picking things up. I created for voiceover. I created a recording space in my home.
Okay.
And have continued to improve that, and picked up jobs. I've done a couple audiobooks. I have done a couple video games. Robert Love at Raven, he said, "Hey, I need somebody. I need a Russian accent. I can't tell you what the project is, but it was just what they call a scratch track, which is a temporary audio they put into the game while the game is being developed." And then Raven Software is now part of Activision. So for their final product, they're always in LA using union voice actors. So, but I got paid, and that was one of the first times. That was actually really one of my first voiceover gigs. And I went there and I, recorded it, and we were done. And he said, "Wow, you did a really good job." I said, "That was my first time in a booth on a paid gig." And he goes, "Get out of here." And he goes, "Well, you understood everything I was saying. You were, completely professional. How?" And it was the Essentials of Voiceover class that I took with Voiceover Nation, because they had gone through all that. We were actually in a professional recording studio, so I knew the proper etiquette for that kind of thing. And Dave Redeman and David Connor, I owe a lot to them because they kind of got me started on it.
Sure.
Other things I've done. One of my agents in Milwaukee, Joan at Lori Lynn's, got me an audition to play the part of a parrot. So I had never played the part of a parrot before, but I looked at it, I thought, I think I can do this.
That is a statement that not many people have had to say in that chair.
Right. Well, when I was growing up, my dad's cousin, we'd go and visit him outside of Chicago, and he had an African gray parrot named Jupiter. And I was fascinated by him. I was terrified of him because he had told me he could take your finger off if he wants to. I'm like,
those are big birds.
But I would listen to him. So I get this audition, and I'm like, okay, everyone's going to do the generic kind of, probably want to crack it.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, I can do a little bit of that, but I got to throw something else in. So this bird would always go really loud, and then he'd go, so I threw that in at the beginning and end of the audition, ended up getting it, and then I went to Hager Audio and recorded it. And they were hooked into a studio in Texas because it was for the Texas Lottery. It was a radio commercial for the Texas Lottery. Had a pirate in. I had also auditioned for the pirate part, but I didn't get the pirate, but I got the parrot. So I went there and did that. So I've done some commercial voiceover work. I've done some audiobook work. I've done some narration. I've done a couple video games. I did one a Croatian video game maker, Serious Sam Tormental, where I did like 6 lines as an airline pilot. And then last year, a game from Double Damage Games called Rebel Galaxy Outlaw came out, and I think I did 4 or 5 characters and like 300 lines of dialogue for him. And that was one of my greatest experiences. So I auditioned for 14 different parts.
Okay.
And the creator of the game is basically a 2-man shop at Double Damage Games, and the creator of the game contacted me and said, hey, I gave you a couple that you auditioned for, but I also gave you a couple others that I think you're going to be able to do, and here are all the pieces, read through them, we're going to roll quickly and be ready. Mm-hmm. So I'm in my basement downstairs, my wife is upstairs, and we go through it, and we're doing multiple takes. We did 300 lines of dialogue with multiple takes in 2 hours. And some of it was yelling and screaming, and I got to do like a hippie throwback radio DJ.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thank you for turning in to Subspace Radio 101.1 point. It was that, and I got to do a hillbilly, and so it was all kinds of really cool stuff, but there was yelling and screaming. I came up after the 2-hour session, he said, okay, I'm done. He goes, send me those tracks, send me everything in WAV format, and I came upstairs, and I'm sweating because there's no ventilation in my booth, and I'm working hard. And my wife is like, what was going on there?
That's awesome.
I said we were doing a video game, so it was great fun. I got to do an audio drama, a Christian audio drama, and this is where you're a business coach, networking. Gary Vaynerchuk says your net worth is equal to your network.
Sure.
Right? And so weird stuff happens sometimes. So I was filming that movie, the Mafia movie about the poker game in Oshkosh, and we were on set, and at one point the director, who's about my age, who I just met that day, said, yeah, I'm going to do an audio drama. And it perked my ears up, and I said, hey, really? I do voice acting as well as on camera acting. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. And I gave my card. Well, we had a long day together, so we got to know each other pretty well.
Sure.
His name is Darby Kern.
Okay.
And we worked, it was 93 degrees outside that day. There's no ventilation in this building. We were in a historic building, really cool, like a ballroom in a club in downtown Oshkosh. And it's sweltering. And we worked 16 hours that day, and it took me 90 minutes to get to Oshkosh. So I had a really long day, but it was a great day. And so we got to know each other a little bit. So at the end of the day, when I was done shooting, I said, hey, if anything on that audio drama, here's my card, give me a holler. And he ended up contacting me the next January and said, hey, I'm putting this together. We're putting together a trailer, an audio drama trailer, as kind of a pitch to a company to see if we can get this produced. And so he asked me to be part of that. So again, I played the bad guy. So that went into production, and that's for sale right now. It's the Jake Muller Adventures, but now he's talking about doing the kind of second series of that. And so I look forward to that. So I've got various experiences. I'm just, trying to find consistent clients at this point.
Okay.
One of the things with voiceover is, especially when you get stuff through an agent, it's usually that gig. You're getting that one gig.
Okay.
Now, I would love to get some of the gigs I'm getting from some of my agents because they're big time national stuff. But competition is fierce. I'm continuing to try to get better. But if you can find a client, where you're going to be my guy. I'm doing YouTube explainer videos. I'm going to use your voice every time I create one. I create, one a month or 3 a year or whatever. Then it's kind of repeat customer. Consistent. And that's kind of where I'm at right now, trying to build those relationships, talking to advertising agencies, reaching out to production houses. Some of the major corporations have their own production facilities. When I went and did the Steinhoffel's ad, I had no idea. They said, okay, show up at the Steinhoffel's, which is in the Waukesha area, just south of 94 there. They have the big chairs, and there's a fountain. And so I'm like, okay, so I roll in. It says, go into this door. So it's back by the loading dock. So I'm like, what are we doing here? Are we filming in the loading dock? Are we going to be filming in the store itself? What's going to happen? And the guy from the ad agency brought me upstairs, and we go through these massive double sliding doors, like 16 feet tall.
Wow.
And I'm like, what's going on? They have an entire Hollywood production facility in their building.
Wow. So they're pushing out some commercials.
Yeah, they do all their commercials there, and they do all their voiceover. They have a voiceover recording booth there as well. So they do all of that in their building. Ira Klusendorf is the guy who's in charge of all their media. And, you know, he showed me around, and I was just blown away. I didn't know that happened. Since then, I found out that there are several of the big companies, American Family Insurance, Harley Davidson, they have their own production facilities. So they don't have to contact a production facility or have the ad agency contact a production facility when they want to do voiceover for a radio ad or when they want to shoot a TV commercial. They have their production facilities right there.
That's kind of cool.
So part of the puzzle then for me to put together is, okay, if I go to this company and I go on LinkedIn, for instance, what are they calling their media person? Because everyone's got a different title.
Sure.
Right? So it could be, you know, head of production. It could be head of video production. It could be media supervisor. It could be. So I'm trying to, you know, directly contact people. You've got to kind of do your research and figure out, okay, one, what is their title? Who do I need to speak with? And then, you know, get them my material so that they can look and say, hey, yeah, this is a fit, this isn't a fit.
Right.
Voiceover is really difficult because it's so subjective. And I know my voice is not right for everything.
Sure.
A couple years after I had gone through VoiceOver Nation's Essentials of Voiceover class, Dave Redeman I had stayed in contact with. We'd go and get a coffee occasionally. And so he said, I have an idea. He said, would you like to teach a class? I'm like, I'm not accomplished enough to teach a class. I don't, you know. He goes, no. He goes, it would be basically what you've just done over the last 2 years. How do you break into the industry? What are the steps you take to try to get where you're at?
Sure.
So you started from nothing, walked in day one having some acting background, but it was stage acting, and now you've got 6 different agents and you worked on these various projects, and you've also gone into on camera. You know, how did you get there? And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't, you know, like, I teach. I'm a teacher. I can do that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I've got the, you know, kind of breadth of knowledge or experience that this is going to be valuable to anybody.
Sure.
And he said, well, do me a favor. He said, go home, write down some of the things that you've done in the last 2 years. Just write down what you've done to get where you are. And so I'm going to go, okay, so I sit down with a legal pad and a pen, and I start writing things down, and then I transcribe it so that someone could actually read it and put it on my computer. And as I put it on the computer, I'm like, oh, yeah, and this and this and this. And so I've just got a list of bullet points. So I copy that, and I email that to him, and he goes, okay, that's awesome. He goes, now make that an outline. So break down each point into subpoints. So I'm like, okay, so I do this, and I start going through it, and then he goes, okay, now, he said, put it into some kind of visual presentation. So I hopped on Prezi. I prefer Prezi over PowerPoint just because if you're presenting to a group, you can zoom in as much as you want. So your like size of font you're choosing when you're making it isn't as important. I mean, you've been to business presentations where they've chosen a font that looked good on their computer.
Oh my
but
gosh.
then you get up on the screen and nobody can read a thing.
Yeah.
So
like,
then they
read this
spend their
novel.
entire presentation reading to you, or there's too many words. So I'm like, okay, so I made this Prezi presentation, and it took me weeks to do, you know, because I'd always let it percolate and come back and take a look at it, and hey, I need to add this, or this really isn't what I wanted to say here. And so I finally sent it to him, and he goes, how long would it take you to teach this? I'm like, oh, I don't know. And he goes, add in any resources, hyperlinks, video clips, audio clips, add in whatever you want. So I go back to the drawing board and I rework it again, and I started acting as if I was teaching, you know. And so I go through the process and I talk it through kind of on my own, and I email him back and I said, this is about 4 hours worth of material. And as I was doing it, I didn't realize how much information I had kind of brought together during my search.
Just collected?
Yeah, exactly. So I said, this is about 4 hours. He goes, okay. is there anything that you missed? And I went back and looked. I'm like, oh, I need to talk about gear. I didn't talk about gear. I was talking about the meeting people and connecting and what are the genres and things like that and books that I would recommend. And so I went and added some other things in, and I said, okay, this is about 6 hours now. And he said, so how would you want to do that? I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, how do you want to teach the class? I'm like, well, I don't know. 6 hours is too much. Break it down. He goes, what about if we do 4 90-minute classes? I'm like, I could do that. And so he set me up. So I teach a class now called Voiceover, What's Next?
Really?
Yeah. And I was teaching it at Anodyne Coffee in the Milwaukee area. And I've had 2 classes go through there. And then I said, we can open this up. So we had a one-day seminar in Madison. My friend Jeff Funk owns Funk's Pub in Fitchburg, and so we had a one-day seminar there. I like the one-day seminar because it's less travel for me, but also the classes were like Monday night for 90 minutes, 4 Monday nights in a row.
Okay.
And that's you're
tough.
imposing on people's schedules. And so I thought if we do a one-day seminar on a Saturday, that'll be cool. So at the end of February, I taught the class. I think we had 5 students in that class. I think there was 13 students in my first class. I think I had 4 students in my second class. But that was right before,
The world fell apart.
COVID-19.
Sure.
Yeah. So on a Saturday, I was teaching my voiceover class all day. And then on Sunday, I went to Nuns, which is just up the road here, the edge of DeForest and Madison. And we filmed 2 TV commercials there. And so I come home that night, and I'm feeling pretty good. I'm like, man, February's been awesome. Because in addition to teaching that class and doing those 2 commercials, I'd been hired to do intros and outros for 3 podcasts.
Nice.
And so I'm like, I'm kicking butt in February. March is going to be
figured out,
March
right?
is going to be great. Narrator, March was not
Kaboom.
great. Yeah. So it was a little rough, but yeah. So that's kind of how I got started. Kind of some of the things that I've done, and I am always connecting with people. And it's a chain. One thing leads to another.
Yeah.
I had done the movie where I played the Russian in Madison, and one of the guys on there was Jeff Funk, who has become a good friend of mine, and he is an IT guy, but he also owns Funk's Pub in Fitchburg, and he decided that he and his family were going to put together a group to do the 48-hour film festival.
Oh.
So the 40-hour film project, Madison has an unusually large and talented pool of people that are involved in it. Usually it happens in July. This year it's going to happen in September because of the pandemic. And so on a Friday night, you meet at a local establishment. They give you the genre of movie you're going to do. They give you the name of at least one character that has to be included. They give you a line of dialogue that has to be included and a prop that has to be included. And then you've got 48 hours to make a movie that is about 7 minutes long. Everything involved with that movie, from title sequences to the action itself, the musical score, sound effects, everything has to be done.
Wow.
So he asked me, after we had done Samantha Derringer together, he asked me, are you interested? I'm like, yeah, I want in.
All right.
So the last 2 years we've done that together, and then through Jeff I've met other people, and so I've some of the people that are big in the Milwaukee film kind of community, and some of the people in the Milwaukee voiceover or Madison voiceover, Madison film community. And so I've done that, and I've done a couple things in Milwaukee and a couple things up towards Green Bay. And so I'm always looking to meet other people. First of all, being around people that are driven and creative. I mean, as a business coach, nobody gave you anything, I'm sure. You have to go out and
figure it
earn
out.
your space, right? And figure things out, do your research, talk to people, find things out, learning things. And maybe that's one of the things I like the most, is that at kind of my becoming advanced age. Learning new things, I think, is really good for you. I tell my students all the time, you should be lifelong learners.
Yes.
And so I've been forced to kind of live that out over the last several years. You know, I'm learning things that weren't natural to me.
Sure.
That I was interested in, but I hadn't had a lot of experience with. And so I've gone out and done that, and then you learn something. And almost everybody I've met in the creative community, a lot of high energy people, a lot of people that have very specific knowledge that I don't have, and so I like to learn from them.
Oh, there's something to learn from everybody. Yeah. It's interesting hearing you talk, because you're essentially in that artistic community, and where you got your creative, and you get to put a spin on different characters and stuff like that you do. I was just presenting at what do they call it, World of Words conference, so it's authors, and I had 50 some in my presentation on Zoom, and I'm like, how many of you would consider yourself confident? And they're like, crickets. And I'm like, how about confident in your work? Crickets. Like, whoa, we got to fix that right now. Because
a lot of people, and I had read an article talk about imposter syndrome. That
huge.
People that are very accomplished, you know, feel like they're imposters. Like, I don't deserve the accolades I'm getting, or I don't deserve the notoriety that I have, because they feel like imposters. I think that is really a positive.
Oh, okay.
Because it keeps you striving to do better.
Fair. There's a hunger there then.
Right.
Strive for improvement.
Yeah, because I coached football for 26 years.
Okay.
And I knew, because I never played college ball. I had played in high school. But I knew that there were people on the field always that knew more about football than me.
Okay.
So I was always willing to learn. I always wanted to learn. I always, listen to people's opinions. I coached with a football coach, who shall remain nameless, who thought he knew it all.
Oh.
We'd go to the coaches clinic in Middleton, and we'd go in to sit down in a session, and 5 minutes in, he'd get up and walk out. I don't need to, I know what I'm talking about. I don't need to listen to that guy.
Ouch.
I don't want people like that.
No.
You want people that are more driven, that are hungry, that want to continue to learn, that want to strive to do better. And I think that although, that crisis of confidence that leads to the imposter syndrome, it can definitely stop you. But I think if you look at some of the people that have suffered from it, they just continue to strive. So I'm sure if you had 50 authors, I'm sure there was people that had done well for themselves, that had sold lots of books, that had reached a lot of people, taught them lessons about life or entertained them, and yet they still feel like, maybe, am I good enough to be in this group?
Yeah, it was weird. It was a huge eye-opener, because I scrapped my presentation. I had this presentation outline that I was just going to bang through for these people. I asked that question midway through, and I'm like, okay, we're going to fix that confidence right now. This other stuff is useless if you don't have the confidence to move forward.
Right.
Like, what steps to take, but you're too shy or too apprehensive to take the steps. It doesn't matter. So get rid of that.
Well, and I think when I was developing the class that I teach now, it was eye-opening for me. Because at first, my initial reaction was, I don't have enough. I don't know enough.
Sure.
I haven't done enough in order to be, teaching people about this. But as my mentor, Dave Redeman, kind of said, no, write this down. And then came back and said, okay, fill this out. Okay, turn this into a presentation. Okay. As I plotted it out, when I look at the entire presentation at the end, I was like, oh, okay, so maybe I have done some things, or maybe I have learned some things, at least, the theories about how to go about this. And so it was a really good thing. My initial point was that voiceover is so subjective.
Right.
And when I teach my class, I tell them, if you want the phone messaging system for a daycare center, I am not getting that phone call, right? Nobody's coming to me with, hi, you're at Kitty Campus. Our hours are, nobody's buying that, right? Whereas if, something like Duluth Trading Company or Granger or my voice fits for that. You know,
Sure.
you want to sell trucks, my voice fits for that. You want a bad guy for a video game, my voice fits for that. There are some things that are just not going to be good for me. I'm probably not going to be the person that is doing e-learning for an economics degree. You know, it's.
I'm trying to picture what voice would do that.
Well,
and keep them awake.
Well, and that's the whole thing, and then that's kind of a fight too. I will get scripts that say, you know, do this. If you haven't figured it out by now, I tend to be a kind of a large personality.
Sure.
I tend to be a little bit louder, and so the characters that I gravitate towards and the jobs that I book tend to be those bigger characters. But I am an educator. I have a master's degree plus 50 credits. I've been teaching social studies. I understand the political system. I understand history. I'm certified to teach Broadfield social studies, history, sociology, geography. But I haven't been able to get my foot in the door of e-learning yet. And I think part of it is the way I talk, because I know when I'm in the classroom with high school kids, I've got to keep them awake. I've got to entertain them. I've got to, you know, bring up goofy examples, because that's what's going to keep them locked in.
Right.
E-learning tends not to be like that. It tends to be a lot more calm and a lot more sedate. And I have a hard time doing that for a length of time. Now, maybe it's just I haven't gotten the right e-learning. I don't want to paint the entire industry with a broad brush. But I met a lady named Christy Bowen who's really good, and she's teaching a master class on e-learning, and I think I'm going to sign up for that because I want to continue to learn. And I think that kind of genre, that alley of voiceover, should be a natural for me, given the fact that I've been spending most of my adult life teaching. So
that's so interesting, because I would figure that e-learning should have to be even more entertaining, because you don't have the support or the accountability of other students around you.
You run your own business. Was there ever a time when you were employed by somebody else?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Did you ever have to sit down and watch training films?
Oh yeah.
How'd you feel about those
Oh,
trainings?
I hated them. You're just watching the clock instead of the video, right?
Yes. And that's kind of my point. But I think everyone who's making those wants to play it safe, because they don't want to turn anybody off or offend anybody.
Sure.
So you end up with very sedate and vanilla instead of anything that has any personality.
Oh, worse than vanilla. It's like oatmeal.
Yeah. And so I you know, maybe that's our next venture. You know, you and I get together and we make training videos that have some personality. You know, I think there could be a market for it. I mean, think about the number of, you know, safety training videos for jobs, you know, things like, you know, proper etiquette in the workplace, given things like sexual harassment, stuff like that. Just onboarding stuff, you know, going through insurance enrollment and benefits. And I think that those could be a lot more interesting. And I think those could, there might be a market there.
There's I guess as I'm thinking about this, the challenge is that you can't be corny to the point of like, are you guys trying to be funny or anything like this? Like it has to accomplish the goal.
It's got to be organic. And your information has to be correct. It's got to be organic. I talk about this in my class all the time. You know, people talk about networking. Okay. For 20 years of my life, maybe more than that, I was a teacher. I knew every September the bus was going to roll up and students were going to pile out. They were going to be in my classroom. I was going to teach them. I didn't have a business card till I was 50.
Sure.
That made my wife laugh. You know, she's been in banking since she was in her mid-20s.
Been hustling business cards for decades,
so
right?
I'm like, okay, so I had to get a business card. You know, 10 years ago, my wife would say, we have to go to a networking event. And I'd be like, oh. First of all, I would have to put on probably a suit and maybe a tie as well, which is something that usually for me only happened at weddings and funerals.
Right.
And secondly, then it was like forced, awkward socialization.
Sure.
Hi, what do you do? I'm a teacher.
Right.
Oh, how are those kids? Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So
I'm a financial planner, a mortgage broker.
Yeah, but once I started doing this, I started seeing all the possibilities. And the big thing is, when you're building any kind of relationship, it has to be organic. People can smell, you know, baloney a mile away. And if you're fake, you know, you're used car sales guy. Hi, how you doing? Hey,
Right.
good to meet you. It's not, it's not organic.
Mm.
And so now when my wife says, hey, we're going to go to a YMCA fundraiser, or hey, we're going to go to a networking event, I'm like, okay, cool.
You bet we are.
I'm going to have my business cards. I'm not going to be the guy that, walks up and sticks it in your face before you've talked to him.
Mm-hmm.
But if you make a real connection with somebody, like, hey, what do you do? Oh, I do this and that. And like, oh, hey, have you ever seen this? And, have you read this book about business? Or have you ever thought about that? Well, what do you do? Well, I'm a teacher, but I also do this. Oh, wow. A lot of people, when I say voice acting, a lot of people are like, I don't know anybody that's a voice actor.
Sure.
I don't know anything about it. Tell me about it. And so I will talk about, you ever listen to the radio? Those radio commercials? That's voice acting. You go to the airport, the announcements, there's no parking in the blue zone.
Right.
That's voice acting. You watch SpongeBob, that's voice acting. And so they'll kind of get drawn in and be like, oh, really? How do you do that around here? I live in Watertown, Wisconsin. How can you be a voice actor in Watertown, Wisconsin? And then we start talking about the technology a little bit and some of the other things. And it usually is a pretty good conversation. And by the time I'm done, finding out about them and what it is they do, and they find out about kind of some of the things I do, there's usually a genuine connection there. And that's what there has to be. When I talk to my students in voiceover, it's like, you've got to be real. You've got to be who you are. I am who I am. My wife says sometimes that she's jealous of me because when I was 39, I got sick.
Okay.
Like really sick, almost died sick.
Oh.
I have an incurable autoimmune disease.
Okay.
And since then, I really don't concern myself with how other people view me.
Sure.
Not to the point where I'm a jerk, but to the point where, I'm not for everybody. I'm going to meet some people that I get along with and some people I don't, just like everybody else on the planet.
Right.
But if you are going to look down on me because I'm a teacher, or you're going to look down on me because I'm a little louder than your average person, or you're going to look down on me because of my political persuasion
Sure.
or anything else,
insert whatever,
yeah,
right?
Then I don't have time for that. It's just not worth it to me. So networking is huge, and like I said, a lot of times it becomes a chain. Like this person, and then hey, they introduce you to this person and this person, and so
huge.
I've met a good number of creative types, and that's the other thing. In the beginning of my educational career, teaching was very creative for me, and I try to keep things fresh and try to keep things popular, but I was really missing kind of we have a standard curriculum, and this is what you're going to teach, and now they want everybody to kind of teach the same thing in a similar fashion, and so it's kind of getting squished down, and some of the art of teaching has been sucked out of it.
All right.
And so when I would go on weekends and do these film shoots or go do other projects, that kind of got my creative fires going again.
Gotcha. Got more
and
fun.
I never really looked at myself as kind of a creative individual, but when you hang around creative people, it's kind of like somebody that's motivated in business. If you hang around other people, who do you choose to surround yourself with?
Energy.
They motivate you, and so it kind of got me rolling and moving, forward in what I want to do, and that's my ultimate goal. In 3 years, possibly retire from teaching, depending on what is going on in the world at the time. And,
who knows?
And then hopefully be able to do this full time. My wife says, "Well, you're not making enough money right now." I'm like, I get that, and I'm going to be teaching something.
Sure.
I don't know what it is I'm going to be teaching, but I'm going to be teaching something as well as doing on camera. I see you have a big Batman poster in your office. A comic fan?
Yeah, I would call it, a little bit, not psycho.
Okay. I'm a huge comic book fan.
Are you? Okay.
And another kind of networking connection thing, when I was on that film set in Oshkosh, there was a young man, maybe 24, 25, who was reading a comic book when I was in a scene, he wasn't in a scene, and I came off, everyone's taking lunch, and I started talking to him because I've been a comic book geek since I was a little kid. And I'm
nice.
like, hey, what are you reading? And when we talked about it and different artists and stuff, and And the director came over, and he was a comic fan too, and he's about my age. And he said, you have to read this book. And it's called The Boy Who Loved Batman.
Okay.
And so I went home and read the book, The Boy Who Loved Batman.
Yeah.
And The Boy Who Loved Batman, it's talked about Michael Uslan. Michael Uslan grew up in New Jersey. He was a big comic fan. And when he was a kid, Batman the TV show came out, and he was so excited because it was going to come out, and it was in TV Guide, and he sat down and he watched it for like 5 minutes and went, oh no, what have they done to Batman?
We're talking about 60s like Adam West?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
He said they've taken the Dark Knight and they've made him into this.
Yeah, what is this?
And so he decided he was going to bring a darker, more realistic Batman to the screen.
All right.
He goes to school in Indiana, and at his college they had a deal where you could undergrads could teach courses.
Oh.
And so he decided he wanted to teach a course about comic books. And he had to give the spiel to, the dean of students, and this is what we're going to do, and da-da-da. And he finally got it okayed. Well, I was sitting around the house 2 years ago and thinking, okay, I teach social studies. I love comic books. Some of the courses I'm teaching are getting a little stale. What if I created my own course? So I wrote down the outline for a class called Superheroes and Social Issues.
Oh.
And so I contacted Michael Uslan, who has been the producer of every Batman movie since Michael Keaton's Batman.
Really?
Yes. All the Batman movies, including
some are super awesome and some are like,
including the Joker movie.
Okay.
And all the Christian Bale movies,
sure.
All of it. And I thought, what do I have to lose? He pitched a class to a head of a college. I'm pitching a class to my principal and my school board. Maybe he's got some tips and pointers for me. And then, so I shot him a message on Facebook. He goes, yeah, sure, email me. I'm like, okay, cool. So I emailed him. I had a bunch of questions, and then I had a blurb. Okay, I'm thinking about using this, this, and this. He emailed me back, and he took each question and then wrote his response below it. And it was about a 3-page email.
Wow.
So here is a multi-billion-dollar producer.
Yeah.
Lives in Hollywood. Big time guy, and he took time out to,
that's
talk
incredible.
to me. And it helped me because when I went to talk to my principal, I was ready. And I was loaded for bear. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I went in, I gave him one analogy to prove my point, and I was getting ready to load up the second point. And he's like, oh, okay, you got me. Yeah, you can do it. So,
easy now, we got it.
So, and then he said, you don't even have to go in front of the school board. He goes, I'm going to go fight for this for you.
Wow.
So it was awesome. So I've been teaching that. Last year was my first year. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, things got sidetracked a little bit,
sure.
and I wasn't able to accomplish all the things in the class I wanted. But we look at social issues.
Yeah.
Through the lens of comic books. The X-Men have always been about civil rights. We take a look at that and look at parallels between Professor Xavier and Martin Luther King Jr. and Magneto and Malcolm X. And,
interesting.
Captain America Civil War, the movie, is based on a comic book just called Marvel Civil War that came out shortly after the Patriot Act in 9/11.
Really?
And it was basically a commentary on government overreach and too much
sure.
regulation by the government and taking people's liberties away in the Patriot Act.
Interesting.
And so those are two of the units that I do in that class. But I would never have had the courage to contact him had I not, met this guy who said, you got to read this book. And he had been friends with this guy for a little bit on social media. And so I thought, I'm going to take a shot. And so you don't know where life's going to take you. And every time you meet somebody, like you said, you can learn something from them. They've got something to offer, and you probably have something that you can teach them. So since I have started doing kind of more creative stuff, voiceover, on-camera acting, I have met so many people that I think, man, that's a really interesting person, and their story is cool. And at some point, I want to, get your backstory as well.
Oh, sure.
Because I think this is an interesting job that you have.
Oh, it's a blast.
You're trying to help other people in with their businesses, and that's an area that as a teacher, I didn't have to worry about business a whole lot. I didn't have to worry about networking. I didn't have to worry about my credits and debits. I didn't have to worry about marketing. I didn't none of that. And when you're a voice actor, it's a one-man show. It's all you.
Yeah.
So you've got to become a competent voice actor. That's step one. You have to become a recording engineer. That's step two. Especially now, people used to be able to go to recording studios. During the pandemic, all those were shut down.
That's why we made this, right?
Yeah.
In my empty office, because I had to send the employees home.
And then you've got to be the business guy, your own accountant, your own PR person, all that. So, it fascinates me what you do and working with other people in business.
It was fun. So much fun.
You enjoy it. What's the charge that you get out of it?
I get to see, the main thing is results. I love when you used to run into people at a restaurant or bar or something like that, and you talked to them 2 years ago, and where they are because either they took your advice or they met the person that you introduced them to or whatever, that they advanced their life in some way. Growth, progress, all that kind of stuff. The other is just seeing the charge off people. They're like, I never thought of that. Or I help people systematize things. Most of the time, when you meet a business owner, they have no idea what they don't know. And most of the time, I've made the same mistakes just 15 years ago.
Right.
So I'm like, let me save you a decade of time here.
Yes. Well, and that's basically what the class I teach is. It took me probably 2.5 to 3 years to gather all that information. And now students can sign up, and in 6 hours, they can get at least great starting points on each one of those topics.
Nice.
And that's what one of the first people I talked to in voiceover, his name is Chris Freeze, and he's out in California. There's a YouTube channel called VO Buzz Weekly. They interview the big-time California, Los Angeles-based voice actors, and I was sitting at home one night watching it, and I thought, I'm going to shoot him an email.
Why not?
Find him, I'm going to shoot him an email. And he seemed like a good dude. He had been working kind of survival job. One of his survival jobs was third shift jailer at a jail in Southern California, so that his days were free, so he could go out and audition. And attempt a voiceover career. And so I thought, well, he seems like a reasonable dude. I'm going to shoot him an email. So I did, and we went back and forth. He responded like immediately. It's like 10:30 at night. I email him. He responds. We go back and forth, and finally, after about 5 back and forths, he says, "Here's my phone number. Call me on Monday at this time. This is Pacific time, your time." So I call him, and it sounds like he's in a wind tunnel. And he's like, "Steve, I forgot." He goes, "I just got called into the studio." He lives 60 miles outside of Los Angeles.
Okay.
He was on his motorcycle.
Oh, nice.
And so I couldn't hear anything. He goes, "I'll call you tomorrow at this time." So I talked to him for probably 90 minutes.
Nice.
And one of the things he said to me is, he says, as you climb the ladder of success, don't pull it up behind you. And that kind of struck me. Being a teacher by nature, I always like to teach and help people out if I can, and that's something that I've always tried to do. Just the other day, through a friend, someone messaged me on Facebook, and it was a kid who's 18 years old, just graduated from high school. He's going to junior college, but he really wants to be a voice actor.
Okay.
And so he said, "Is it okay if I call you?" And we talked for probably an hour.
Nice.
And I said, "If you need anything, here's some good starting points. These are some books you should look at. These are some sites you should look at. When you kind of gone through that material and let it percolate, get back to me and we'll talk again." So, I think that I understand the energy you get from that. If you can get somebody and like, hey, these people that went through my very first What's Next class, some of them have agents now, and some of them are booking gigs.
That's cool.
And that's fun. I was a coach of, like I said, I coached wrestling for a dozen years, and I coached football for 26 years. And and when you teach somebody something and they're able to apply it and it's successful, that feels great. Yeah, that feels great.
Yeah,
So.
It's awesome. It's incredible, and it's so much fun. It's so much fun. I enjoy teaching people, and I enjoy, I guess, when I'm teaching with coaching, business coaching, I have more liberties. I suppose the same thing you do with teaching voiceover stuff. You have more liberties with how and what versus
Right.
when
At school, yeah. There are certain parameters you have to stay within. But yeah, teaching voiceover is it's whatever I want it to be. does my presentation look like? Do things need to be added, changed, deleted? And it's the same thing I've done in teaching is, they call it reflective teaching. At the end of a unit or at the end of a semester or a year, you look back and like, okay, what really worked? What didn't work?
Sure.
Why didn't it work? What can I do to change it? And I'm sure you've gone through the same thing in your business curriculum as well.
Yeah, sometimes I think of myself a little bit like a stand-up comic, and you find out, well, that didn't fly. That didn't work so well. Is that crickets?
Yes,
That's crickets.
I am the same way. And being a classroom teacher, I'll tell the same joke 3 hours in a row if it's the same class. It's different students, but I'm teaching the same thing.
Yep.
We're at the same point. I'll tell, and sometimes it's gangbusters, and sometimes, it's hello.
Is
Are you
this
there?
on?
Yeah. So I get that. No, it is, but then you gotta revise. How did I approach this? And that's one of the things. Before we really got rolling, we were talking about Rogan's podcast. Obviously phenomenal stand-up comedian. One of the things I really enjoy when he has other comics on, he talks about the process that he uses to get, that 1 hour comedy special you see from him has probably been a year in the making.
Oh, yeah.
And when he sits down to write bits and stuff like that, and he talks about economy of words and trying to get it, so it's distilled down to its essence.
There's such an art.
And that's, the same thing. If you are too verbose in coaching somebody for business, or if I'm too verbose in teaching voiceover, or for sure teaching freshmen about the government of the United States of America.
They're lost.
Yeah, you're going to lose them. So.
Yeah, Joe Rogan's got a cool thing going on. I love the format where it's long.
Yeah.
And it's just conversation like this is going on. And I like his studio because it's just like, it doesn't matter. We're here.
Right.
There's a couple microphones and probably a producer or something.
A friend of mine, Jeff Malloy, who is, they used to call him liaison officers. I don't know what they call him now. He was a cop in our school.
Sure.
And he turned me on to him 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay.
And I was like blown away. And then I've started to find other podcasts, voiceover related podcasts or acting related podcasts.
Oh, sure.
And so I just think it's a great way. Now I have a commute that lasts about 4 minutes. So from my house to the high school where I teach.
Yeah.
So it's not a big time there. But when I'm on the riding lawnmower, I'm out there for over an hour for sure. I can listen then. Or if I'm traveling, like today, when I travel to teach my voiceover class in Milwaukee, I'm going to have 2 hours that night. I can sit and listen. And Rogan is, he's one of the biggest. And I think the way that he goes about it, the guests that he chooses are fantastic. So.
They are. Yeah, he does a good job. It's so, I guess, from my point of view, when I look at YouTube videos to start, like, I don't know, let's call it 5-10 years ago, people said you could throw up whatever you wanted. It doesn't have to be refined or edited. And I feel like that's evolved to a point.
Oh, for sure.
That you have to have stuff that's edited. Editing takes time and money.
Yeah.
And Joe, though it is edited, and like they do screen flips back and forth and stuff like that, he's got some people doing that. It's still, there's still an authenticity.
Right.
Where it's not too polished.
Right.
Like my kid watches Dude Perfect on YouTube.
Oh, yes.
Right? He's a little 6-year-old kid. So he, I guess when he was 5, was under the impression that you could throw a ball and make it in some crazy psycho shot first try. I'm like, well, they probably attempted that 500 times before they made it.
Right.
And they had to go through a lot of editing and all this kind of stuff to get that little 10-second shot. And so we had to look for clips of people falling off bikes and doing stuff where they actually made mistakes in order to get the success.
Yeah.
It was interesting just trying to consider from a 5-year-old's perspective, you should just be a natural at
These
everything.
guys are just awesome.
Yeah. So I'm like, there's some mistakes that happen.
Well, and if any of the YouTube channels, regardless of what the topic is, if they've got longevity and you look at them from 8 years ago and you look at them now.
Well, they've been refined.
Yeah. There's what's his name? There's a guy who was in Cleveland, Ohio, who is an on-camera actor.
Okay.
And now he's moved to Atlanta. And he has really concise kind of acting tips and specific things that I've been watching a lot recently. And even over the course of 4 years, the quality of his videos have improved 1,000%.
Really?
Yeah,
That's cool.
The sound quality is way better. The lighting is much better, and that's one of the things is on-camera acting now. Nobody's having auditions in person, or few people are having auditions in person. They're either doing a Zoom Skype kind of thing, or more likely you're doing a taped audition.
Okay.
And so
you're recording something?
Yeah, so if you send in a taped audition and the sound is garbled or the lighting is horrendous, you know, even though you may be a fantastic actor, that's going to come through and going to be like, you know,
so a technology limitation.
Yes.
All right, they're not willing to invest in their in themselves.
And so his clips you can see have improved a ton.
Sure.
And I think if, like I said, I'm not sure where YouTube's headed because of people being deplatformed and demonetized and things like that. But if you are going to be a leader in any area on YouTube, you need to have the quality down. My daughter and I, when my daughter was in middle school, she would talk about these YouTubers and that YouTuber and the other YouTuber, and I'm like, that's a real job? Come on, man. But now that I have some YouTube people that I follow frequently, and now that I've attempted editing my own auditions, I realize it takes a lot of skill and a lot of hard work in order to make that, you know, a presentable product. So I'm pretty impressed with them. Now, like I said, unfortunately, I'm not sure that door is going to be open for a lot of people at this point.
It's tough to say.
Because, you know, YouTube is kind of crunched down like, hey, a lot of people are making a lot of money on our platform. We want to make more money. So, you know, they're ratcheting down a little bit so that the platform is making more, but each individual person is probably making less. I feel like they're making
a lot of money.
I'm not against capitalism.
Right.
I'm all about, you know, if people are willing to pay you to do something, great.
Right.
But I just wonder, you know, what that next platform is.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It reminds me of this. I had an item on eBay. This was years ago, back when people used eBay. And I was setting up, was probably some black hat type SEO stuff.
Okay.
So I buy and sell car parts, because they get old cars and stuff like that. So I'd put car parts out there. And I know that people got to find that car part in order to decide if it's what they're looking for and want to buy it. And so I'd put the description, but then I would put all kinds of misspellings for a given word. Like if it was for Pontiac, you just figure out a million different ways.
How would they misspell Pontiac?
Yeah, and then Trans Am, is that 2 words, that 1 word? And then Firebird, 2 words, 1 word. Camaro, 2 words, you know, all that kind of stuff. Different spellings.
Right.
There's people selling a Camaro and they still don't know how to spell the word Camaro, right? So I have all these misspellings in there. And I would put them in white, so that a person wouldn't see them, but back then a search engine would, especially the eBay search engine. So I get this woman calls me up and she's like, hey, you're doing all right selling on eBay, we want to help you. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And so she's like, you can do X, Y, and Z. And I was like, I'm already doing this. And she's like, whoa, you can't do that. And I'm like, I can, I do.
I have.
It helps, yeah. And she's like, no, that's against our blah, 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 whatever. And I was like, well, if it was really against it, you have programmers smart enough to block that from happening.
Right.
So, no. And she essentially said, we'll have to cancel all your auctions. And I said, look, you got to understand something. We don't need you as much as you need us. Because if you go away, there's going to be another program or another website that's going to pop up and offer the same service. And I feel like that's the same thing with any of the social media things, YouTube, whatever, that if they go away, it's not like, oh, what do we do now?
Right.
There's going to be another kid in his garage.
There will be a place. It seems like the natural progression has been, okay, they're a startup and they get rolling and people flock to that platform.
Right.
And it jumps up and now they're starting to make serious money and now they become the supreme overlord and start deciding what should and should not be appearing on their platform, deciding who has, you know, violated their community standards.
Right.
And then they start cranking down on people.
And that's when people start just leaving on their own.
And maybe that's good because then it continues to refresh. Like we'll get another platform. So maybe YouTube does go the way of the dinosaur, but like you said, there will be something else out there.
Yeah, just think of it like Napster in the 90s, right?
Right.
Napster went away. Yeah, it's just like a weed, right? Yeah. You cut that weed, 3 more pop up.
Right.
Just like we as a society want to put out our stuff, right? Whether that's trick shots or whatever. doesn't really matter the platform as long as there's an audience, right?
Right. And that's the big thing. And as a business coach, I imagine this is, how do you find that audience? How do you get in touch with people that want to use your business or service? That to me is the biggest thing. Like, you can have the greatest game in town, but if nobody's watching that game,
right?
How do you draw them?
It's interesting because at this author program this past weekend, somebody posed the question, how am I supposed to rise up all the noise above all the other authors? And I say, you don't have to rise above all the other authors. You don't have to go above and beyond Stephen King or Nora Roberts or somebody that's pumped out millions of books and has this super following, or they write on a napkin and sell it for millions of dollars. You don't have to get above that. You have to get above a bar that's fairly low in order for you to make a living at it. And you have to get above a bar that way where you're like, holy cow, I can't believe I'm making this much money. You don't need a gazillion followers or anything. You don't need a billion likes. I feel like the threshold for what you really need to accomplish what most people would be happy with, it's not insurmountable.
And I think it comes back to what we were talking about before, being genuine and organic. I mean, who are you? What is your message?
Right.
Do you have something that people want to know about? Listening to Rogan's podcast, and they had a guy who was a former Navy SEAL on there. And this is a guy who was a Navy SEAL for years, but he always knew he was going to be an author.
Oh, nice.
And so he got out and he started writing books. I'm on the third of the series right now. He writes fiction novels.
Okay, I was just going to ask. Okay.
And now his books are going to create a streaming series for Amazon, and Chris Pratt is playing the lead character.
Wow.
So he's in it big time right now. Yeah,
he's doing okay.
If he's getting an A-list actor
right.
to star in his series, his streaming series. But he said, I always loved reading. I loved reading adventure, action kind of stuff. I knew I wanted to be an author. I knew I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. He goes, I never wrote anything down while I was being a Navy SEAL because I was being a Navy SEAL.
Sure.
He said, and
just focused.
Yeah, and now he said, when I got out, then I started putting everything down and putting down story ideas and putting down things that I have gone through. And obviously, he brings a realism that a lot of authors can't bring.
Right.
Tom Clancy, great researcher. Lots of realism in his book, possibly too much in my estimation.
Sure.
But he's never going to know what it's like to be, doing close quarters combat in Afghanistan, or, what kind of weapon system and how does this weapon system function, or what are the weaknesses of a certain weapon system or something like that. And so that's just who he is, and that's organic, and that's his brand, and he's had great success with it.
Huge success, yeah.
I'm interested in the author thing here. So. Okay. How did you come in contact with them? Authors of what? Fiction, nonfiction, what?
So that's something that evolved because it used to be an in-person conference. It started. So the conference is When Words Collide. It's based out of Canada, in Calgary, and I think it was put on by a group that's like the Alberta Romance Novel Association or something like that. And they've evolved into including all authors.
Okay.
And then with the whole COVID thing, they've evolved into including international, right? So there were members, or there were attendees, I should say, that were from all over the world. And there were presenters that were from, we'll call it all over North America. And that's something that was new. So it happened over Zoom instead of at some hotel or whatever. So I got in there because my sister's an author. Fiction writer.
What kind of fiction?
She does fantasy romance. Which, if ever there was a book that was odd to read, it was fantasy romance written by your sister. I'm just going to skip this part.
I've done a couple audiobooks, and most of the fiction stuff is just too tough. I mean, think about one of your sister's books. Think about the number of characters in that book.
Surreal.
And think about the number of voices that you'd have to do. And I've done auditions, and I've gotten books. My voice and female characters, not a great match.
I'm right there with you. Yeah, it's interesting. 'Cause I think her book is being converted into a screenplay. One of her books is.
Excellent.
I think, yeah. It's a weird thing. She started it kind of as a hobby and then said, hey, this is cool, and just up from there.
Fantastic.
So, yeah, she invited me to do this because I'm a business coach, and a lot of authors are struggling. I didn't realize how bad, but it comes down to perception, right? Self-perception.
Well, and part of it is anybody can self-publish now, and so there's just a glut of stuff out there. And
yeah,
I call it the democratization of the media.
right.
Since we've had the democratization of the media, anybody with a microphone and a computer is a voice actor.
Here we are.
Anybody with a video camera is a YouTuber. You
Right.
know, anybody with a word processor is an author. You know, and there are a lot of people out there. So the competition is crazy right
Oh, it's
now.
thick. Yeah,
You know,
super thick.
a lot of people out there that want to do things, but it's interesting. So I understand kind of where the authors are coming from when they say, how do we rise up above the noise?
Right,
know?
to a point, but a lot of them, they've written their book, they've edited their book, and now they're looking for a publisher, like a big name publisher.
Right.
And my point of view, and this is me publishing a couple books, self-publishing, I don't even look for an agent or an author. Because when I learned that you had to find an agent
In
before
order
you go to
get
a publisher,
yeah.
I'm like, well, that seems like an extra layer of uselessness to me. Because I feel like there's a middleman for everything, right? And I'm
Yes.
like, what? I'm banking on this person's opinion
Right.
to bank on another person's opinion, and then I'm relinquishing a certain volume of control and making less money, and I'm told to still market my book?
Yeah.
Screw that. One that's going to take way too much time. So I'm just going to self-publish.
Yes.
If in the end I have to market it myself anyways, I don't need anybody else's opinions
Well,
outside of the readers. If a reader tells me, hey, XYZ, totally fine. But some random publisher,
Yeah.
you mean nothing to me.
The other thing you're talking about authors, and what I have found about people that are creative types is, the business acumen may not be there. I would, although
Totally true.
I'm not creative. Just simple things. When I went through my first voiceover class, they were saying things like, you booked a gig, be there 15 minutes early, make sure you have a bottle of water, make sure you have your script, make sure you're ready to rock and roll. If you use reading glasses, bring your reading glasses.
Sure.
Things like that. And I'm like, well, isn't that just
Common sense.
called being a professional?
Right.
But I've been on film sets where we're waiting for somebody. It's 40 minutes past when they were supposed to be here.
You're kidding.
No.
Oh, that's
I've
going to cost a lot of money.
I've been, on Skype calls with people for projects, and they're not there when they're supposed to be there.
Really?
I don't know. This may be a stereotype. The creative mind, I think, takes over so much sometimes that practical side maybe gets lost.
Okay.
They've fed their creative side of their mind so much that some of the other things might not.
All right.
You know what I mean? I don't
Logic
know.
takes away.
Yeah,
That's fair.
I don't know. But,
That's fair.
so I can understand, and I can identify with the authors that maybe their business acumen is not
Yeah.
what they'd hope it to be.
I think a lot of it was they hear from other authors. So I heard one author say, I actually have heard a lot of authors say this, that if you self-publish, that a publisher, I want to say old-fashioned, but we'll call it traditional, right?
Traditional, yes.
Traditional publisher won't
touch
look
you.
at your stuff. And so my first thought was, one, is that based on any fact? Like, has an author actually heard that? They presented their stuff to a publisher, and the publisher said, oh, you self-published before, we don't want to have anything to do with your stuff.
Right.
Because in the end, my point of view is if the publisher sees your stuff and likes it, and they believe they can make money off of it, they don't care about the other stuff, right? They just want to know that they can make money off of it, if they're smart. The other side is, if it's not based on fact, that's based on hearsay or opinion. So it seems to be kind of gossip at that point. And I'm like, plus, who cares? Just self-publish. I don't want to say technology because it really isn't a whole lot of technology, but the availability and the low barrier to entry, even since I've published my book.
Well,
right?
and that's what I'm saying, that kind of democratization of the media.
Huge.
We all have access now, you know? I mean, when you were a little kid, if somebody said, you're going to go make a 7-minute movie.
Right.
Okay, so first of all, who had the equipment then?
Yeah, that $5,000
Right.
camcorder.
And who had a microphone, and how are we
Right.
going to do this? And then edit it. How are you going to edit it? And what are we
yeah,
gonna
with your
do?
VCR tape.
And then once it's done, you're going to show it on a sheet in the living room for your
Right.
family at Thanksgiving, and then it's going back in a box and nobody's seeing it. And now everybody.
Oh yeah, on your phone.
And that's good and bad, right?
Yeah, there's pro con. I guess the pro is that it's available, right?
Right.
So if you have something to say, you can say it. The con is that everybody's saying something, so there's a lot of noise.
Yeah.
Now it's
Yeah,
like
you
a
gotta
whole
sift
world of
through
Twitter.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, you have to sift through and figure out what has value for you.
Yeah, but in the end, I guess that's the value, what it comes down to, of word of mouth is still popular or still useful.
Right.
And search engines, right? Where you can say, I want to, well, to a point, because sometimes they seem biased.
Oh,
But
definitely.
you can find stuff. Like, there's still ways to get noticed to a point. Like, it just takes time.
Yeah.
I like it better this way because there's a lot.
Right.
I used to be in graphic design, and I remember the first time that I got an ad published for another company in a magazine, and so it looked super refined, right? You open up it wasn't actual, let's just say People magazine. You open up this ad, and you're like, oh, that's a nice ad, and I feel like this business ad that I'm looking at is so refined and high up here.
Right.
Then I made one, and I was like, I made that thing. Wait a second, the people that make these are just dudes. They're just people. They're just people, right? It's just like you meet any author, any famous person. They're just a person.
Right.
They just happen to get noticed more. So, ain't no thing. You can do that.
Well, and that's what it is, just kind of having those opportunities. And
Yeah.
that comes back to what we were talking about with networking is, how many people do I know in this community? How many of those people are, for me, talent buyers that want someone on camera or they want a voice for something? And,
Sure.
and hey, what kind of project do you have? Is it something that I'm a fit for? Because maybe I'm not a fit for it.
Yeah.
If they're looking for small, frail dude to play a part in a TV commercial, it's probably not going to be me. If they're looking for that voice for the phone answering machine at the
Right.
Kitty campus, that's probably not going to be for
Not
me.
ideal.
So, but it's the more people you network with, the more opportunities that are going to be out there.
Absolutely.
And then they know somebody, like how we got introduced. Jackie said, hey, here's a guy I think you should meet.
Yeah, connections.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you broke it down, right? It's the more you get out there, the more you'll be out there.
Right.
You can't just sit at home and wait for the phone to ring. Or
Yeah.
wait for that email to pop up being like, hey, we got this check for you. Where should we send it?
Right. Well, and I, as a reasonably intelligent adult, I had ideas about what it was going to be like too, and like, man, when I get my first agent, I'm just going to sit at home. They're going to be backing up the Brinks truck.
Oh, sure,
Life is
yeah.
going to be good.
Where should we put all this money?
That's not how it happened.
All
at
these
all.
duffel bags of cash.
Yeah, because it was a Milwaukee talent agent, and they only kicked up probably 3 voiceover auditions a year at that time.
A year.
Yeah.
Oh, ouch.
And
Okay.
now I get much more than that. But even my best agent is impressive talent, Lisa Ristow in Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay.
Gets me the best auditions. But she's probably got 100 people on her roster.
All right.
Of that 100, there are probably 35 to 40 that are their voice and my voice will be okay for the same things.
Okay.
There are probably 100 other agents out there that are all getting the same audition. So if they all have 35 people on their roster that are about right, now we're,
You got
you've got
competition.
thousands of people. And so talking about imposter syndrome, it occurred to me one time when Lisa sends out auditions, she has your email address shows up, but everyone else's is blocked. One day she accidentally sent one out that had everyone's email address on because she was in a hurry. And I went and kind of, being the nosy person I am, I
Sure.
went and looked through the email addresses, and I started looking at the names, and I thought, how am I ever going to get a job if I'm competing against these guys?
Oh.
And then I sat there and was sad for a while. And then I thought, oh, wait a minute. She's the one that brought you on. She listened to your demos, and she brought you on. She knows the business. She knows these guys. So she knows what's capable out there. So, yeah, you do have a place
Same
at the
level,
table.
sure.
So take a shot at it. So, and that goes back to that imposter syndrome we were talking about. It's like, I don't know if I can do that. Well, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
True story.
So I'm going to take some shots. I'm going to invest in myself. I'm going to try to do what I want to do. I've enjoyed teaching tremendously. I can't think of a job that I could have that I could spend as much time with my children during the summer, during
sure.
holidays. Both of my sons played high school football. I was able to coach both of them.
Nice.
My daughter played volleyball and tennis in school. I got to take time off because my principal knew when she made the state tournament for tennis that was important to me. So he said, "Yeah, use your PTO basically and go watch her play tennis. This doesn't happen all the time." And so teaching has been great, but I am ready to stretch my legs a little bit and do some other things, to work as an on-camera actor, to work in voice acting, and I'm hoping that, things settle down here with the pandemic, because
eventually
it's a tough deal, and
it's incredibly tough.
People have very strong opinions on both sides of the aisle, and I understand, because I have an autoimmune disease.
Okay.
So my immune system isn't what it probably should be.
Sure.
So I'm at greater risk.
Okay.
Being in a classroom setting, obviously, is,
sure. It's a germ factory on its own, right?
When I initially got sick, I was in the ICU at Freighter for 4 or 5 days. I was in a regular room at Freighter for another 5 or 6 days.
Wow.
And my doctor, my rheumatologist, who is the specialist that deals with autoimmune disease, was sitting on the edge of my bed and said, "Well, we got to think about a plan for getting you back to work, but understand for the next 3 months, you will have zero immune system."
Zero.
And I started to laugh. And she says, "What's so funny?" And I said, "I work in a building with 1,300 germ bags every day."
Right.
She's like, "What do you do?" I'm like, "Public school teacher." She's like, "Oh my." So, I fought back from that. I understand it. I think people also understand that kids getting face-to-face education is
huge,
far superior to kids getting virtual education. And I know,
long shot.
And this is the saddest part to me in my own community. I've seen it kind of tear people apart and have people just behaving really, really badly, because it's an emotional topic. Is that I think we want the same things.
Totally agree.
We have
the intent is
different ideas on how we go about achieving those things. And I don't know, given the science of this disease that we've seen over the course of the last 6 months, I don't know that anybody has a monopoly on the correct information.
No.
So.
No, not by a long shot. Yeah, I'd agree that the intent, the overall intent of society, I think wants the same thing a year, 5 down the road, whatever.
Right.
But how we get there, correct.
Yeah.
They have different opinions about that.
Yeah.
But you probably argue that about anything.
Correct. I would agree.
The way you get to grandma's house, right? My wife will say something and I'll say something else. So we both want to get to grandma's, right? So it's the same thing.
Yeah.
I think people get a little fired up. I think people are getting more fired up because they've been so cooped up.
Oh, for sure. It's a perfect storm of horribleness.
Yeah.
You take a frightening disease. You take a frightening business climate because so many businesses have
shut the doors.
Basically shut the doors. You take people and tell them they have to stay in their homes, and they do that for months on end with nothing, really to look forward to or to go out and do.
Yeah, there's no metric for this will be over when.
And it's just my wife and I have this discussion a lot. She goes, "We should do something fun. What's fun to do?" And then we'll sit there for 30 seconds and wait for the other one to come up with an idea. So, we walk the dog a lot. We go out for walks, maybe dine at a restaurant that has outdoor seating and something like that. But yeah, because everyone has been cooped up for so long and they feel strongly about it, one side or the other, they are, and then you throw social media in the mix and
you can just circle the drain with everybody.
Wow, it just becomes a dumpster fire.
Yeah. It's a mess.
It's frightening.
It's a mess. Yeah, it's one of those, it's a weird dynamic, I guess, because people, I don't know, we just went up north to see my dad who's in the hospital, and further up north, the mask thing, some do, some don't, right?
When you say up north, where are we
Eau
talking
Claire.
about? Eau Claire.
Yeah. And whatever, I guess I don't have a disease or anything like that, so I'm just like, whatever, we'll just do whatever it is that you guys feel is okay, whatever, adapt. But we're at my dad's hospital. We can't see him. One person can see him and one person can call. So my sister is doing both of those because she's up there and whatever. So she's taking care of my dad more or less. We're making sure that the doctors take care of my dad.
Yeah.
Anyways, she's like, we're in this room. There's a window. Come on over and call me up, and then we can have a conversation. So we go outside my dad's window at the hospital, and I'm on the phone talking to him. And 5 minutes later, security guards come up and say, you can't be here. And we're like, there is no way that we can give him anything that we have through this glass, right? It was obvious what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right? We're clearly just talking to my dad who's sick. All right, and they're like, no, can't happen.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I feel like we're getting a little extreme here.
Well, and like you said, it varies place to place. My son and his wife live in Minocqua.
Okay, way up north.
Way up. So, yeah, different kind of perspective on things there.
Sure.
I would suggest, the large urban areas, I'd be frightened as well. Mm-hmm. If I was in an urban area of 2 to 10 million people,
right,
I'd be scared.
Sure.
The people that have chosen to live in those urban areas have made certain choices. Convenience, accessibility,
sure,
they've had it great. But this is, a human-born disease that is being transferred by humans when you live around that many humans.
Right.
And then since our major media centers are in those places, that's the picture they see.
Right.
They don't see, rural or semi-rural Wisconsin. And so it's a different reality for people based on where they live. And unfortunately, I see that as another kind of, schism, people being pitted against each other,
right,
people that live in rural America and people that live in urban America, and that's unfortunate. But it's when you have a one-size-fits-all kind of program, that you're going to end up with problems like that.
It's just like universal parts for a motorcycle, right? It
yes,
universally fits none.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, whenever it says universal, you better move on to the next.
Get your drill.
Yeah, it fits all of them equally poorly.
Yes. Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough thing. And I see it with a lot of friends with their businesses. I got a friend with a retail store on State Street, right? So retail, downtown with the whole protest thing, the COVID thing. There's just a lot of reasons that people are afraid of that.
Right.
And you pull out the convenience, right? People are like, well, if I'm going to stay at home, I'm going to stay at home and shop.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of businesses that have done well, right? Zoom is probably doing okay.
Right.
Love them or hate them.
Right.
Amazon, I think, is doing all right, right?
Yeah.
A lot of.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to file Chapter 11
Yeah,
anytime
right.
soon.
Some of those businesses are doing incredible, where other ones, I feel like it's an interesting. It was an interesting game that people got, or interesting rules that people got thrown at, when they may lose their business through no fault of their own, which is sometimes that's a game of business, which is frustrating.
Well, and that's the worst part. My wife and I are having this discussion. There are a couple people that have been active in our community that are good people and really want the best for the community. They own several small businesses, and they've been really vocal about, hey, we really need to get rolling again, because they're on the verge of losing their businesses. And I said that business is kind of like playing poker. When you play poker, it's a game of incomplete information. You can, based on the information you have, make all the right calls.
Yep.
Statistically perfect, and still get beat.
Yes.
And that's kind of what this is, throwing a wrench into people. People who have done a really good job of running their business. They've got, the overhead as low as possible. Their profit margin is there. They're providing a good service or product to the community. They're well liked in the community. They treat their employees well, and yet, because they were shut down for such a period of time, they could be closing their doors for good. And it's frustrating. I don't know how you fix that. I don't know what we do at this point.
Yeah, in the end, there's certain businesses that can pivot. They have they either have the revenue or they have the resources. A lot of it's mindset, or they just have to pivot. There's some, like I was talking to another friend of mine, where I was just like, there's no shame in closing. Like, it comes on, is it a pride thing, or is it this is the only way that I know how to make money? A lot of it's if you have a lease, you got a 5-year lease or something
Right.
like that.
Yeah, you're on the hook.
Yeah, you're on the hook for that, so you got to find a way. So it's challenging. And the way that I look at it a lot, my wife and I disagree with this.
You disagree with your wife on things?
Oh, most of the time.
How long have you been married?
Oh, hell. 19 years. Yeah, 18 years. A while. Yeah, I just feel like I even wrote a blog about this in March, where the fallout I don't think is worth what we're saving, from my opinion.
It's and I've read other people that agree that we've taken relatively drastic measures. Now, you talk about human life and obviously we don't get to choose but I still don't know if we understand the disease well enough to be able to identify, you hear, okay, it's not hitting young people. Now more young people are testing positive, but they're not showing symptoms. But then there are some people that are, it's damaging their heart without their knowledge, and they're finding that out after the fact. And I just, it's so hard to say. I don't know. As a person that studied history, they always say you probably have to be about 10 years removed from something before you can really get an accurate view of what was going on.
Right.
It's in 2030, it'll be interesting to look back and
hindsight, right?
Yeah, right. Because
just the same way we look at 9/11.
Right, exactly. You can look at it and say, people at the time said that Patriot Act was, an absolutely proper response to what was going on in our country. And now we can look back and say, hey, you know what? We sold some of our liberties down the river with the Patriot Act. And allowed the government to expand its power even more. And so I'm sure, there will be some people that will say the same thing, but it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens. I guess my biggest hope is that with the reopening of many schools, I hope we don't see, massive spikes in. I think we're going to see numbers go up as far as people testing positive. I hope that the deaths don't rise, but it's scary. It's to be a business coach in a time when business is so vulnerable has to be hugely interesting.
Yeah, there. On the flip side, construction is doing incredible. So I have a phone answer.
Why is that?
People are stuck in their house, so they're not going on vacation, right?
So they had that money and
we had $5,000 planned for this cruise.
So
let's redo our bathroom or finish our basement, or my sister-in-law added a pool, right? Like we're not going to Disney World, so that money that we had allocated for this, that got canceled. So what are you going to do? You're going to put it in retirement?
Well, you know who does an excellent job at that? Nuns, kitchen, bathroom, and flooring, located in Madison, Wisconsin.
Nice. I imagine they're doing well. Furniture and stuff like that.
I would think. I don't know.
I look at all this, even the projects that I've been working on. Like I always have this joke, right? The projects you do at your house on your own always get 90% done.
Right.
Like we had a ceiling fan. I put it the ceiling fan when we moved into our house. It's got that little trim ring. But because the ceiling fan, the base was a little bit smaller than the old one, there's that little circle that's got to be painted. It took us 9 years.
Carpentry, mechanics, right? Look at a mechanic's vehicle. It's usually the roughest running vehicle because they're spending all their time working on other people's vehicles.
But just think, their business is probably suffering now because people are driving way less.
Right.
Well, so it's a weird...
When you look at some of the pictures of pollution in the major cities, and you could actually see the sun in Los Angeles now.
Oh, interesting.
Because, what...
It doesn't smell like urine anymore. Right?
Well, like I said, Chris Fries, who was the voiceover guy I talked to, I said the next day when he called me, I said, "So you were on your motorcycle?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I live 60 miles away from Los Angeles."
Yeah.
He said, "If I owned a car, it would take me several hours to get to where I needed to be." He goes, "On my cycle, I can legally lane split here."
Yep.
So I can zip down, and once I'm off the freeway, I'm on surface streets, I'm close, no problem. So he said, yeah, I drive my motorcycle. But somebody was telling me that to move 13 miles, a voice actor was talking about, I have this audition, I have to show up on time. He had to allow 2 hours to travel 13 miles in Los Angeles. So think about that amount of traffic.
That's surreal.
So now wipe that out for at least 2.5 months or 3 months or most of it. You've still got supply chain vehicles that are going through. But so, yeah, I'm sure the air quality improved a ton.
Sure.
You know, you look at pictures like the canals in Venice, Italy. You know, they said the dolphins or porpoises were back because there was less garbage there.
All right.
Things like that. So, I mean, I hope we learned something. I don't know if humans were meant to live, you know, shoulder to shoulder on top of each other, millions and millions of people in a square mile.
I remember my history teacher in middle school was telling me about how we used to be nomadic. And then agriculture came along, and then industrial age, blah, blah, blah. So, right or wrong, this is where we are.
Well, and I think this is causing a lot of people to stop and pause and examine their lives, and people are moving. You know, we brought up Rogan several times. Rogan says he's out of L.A.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
End of the month, he's moving to Texas.
Oh, interesting. Because he can do it anywhere.
Right. He said, I could do this anywhere.
I just heard his interview with Edward Snowden.
Yes.
That's why the whole Patriot Act thing was tough of mind.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's I love his podcast because of the variety of guests that he has. But yeah, there are people apparently that are bailing and getting out of Los Angeles.
Sure.
You know, with voice acting, a lot of people decided they wanted to get into voice acting because there was a lot of people that were actors that were at home during this. Like, what do I do now?
Right. Hey, are they making movies?
Well, what did I hear? I heard Tyler Perry is making movies, but he basically has his own complete studio and compound.
Okay.
And he brings the entire cast and crew in, tests everybody, make sure there's no COVID.
Yeah.
And then they do the production, and they're basically sealed in the
so
compound
there. Okay.
for the duration of the production. Now, apparently, he's really good at what he does because he'll crank out a full movie in like 30 days or 60 days. So it's basically you're going to go work there for 60 days. You're going to stay there the whole time.
All right.
Because that's really the only way to be able to control.
Right.
You know, there's no other way to do it at this point. So it.
Are some sports teams doing that too?
I just started watching. Hard Knocks on HBO.
Okay.
Have you ever watched? Okay, so Hard Knocks is an HBO series that's been on for over a decade. They take one team usually every year, and they embed people with that team, and they watch what goes on, and then they'll take a whole week of footage, and they'll chop it down into an hour, and they'll pop that on the screen, and you'll be able to watch it the next week.
Okay.
Excuse me. Just a dry throat.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Isn't that weird? No. Did you just cough?
You cough or sneeze in a store, and everyone's head whips around like, no,
take cover.
I have allergies. And this year they're choosing two. They took the Los Angeles Chargers and the Los Angeles Rams, and they're doing both of them, but they are taking lengthy rules and regulations to try to keep this from happening. But I can't remember which it was because they were flipping back and forth in that first episode. One of the teams had a rookie tested positive.
Oh.
And so he's got to stay home for 10 days.
Okay.
Now, I know football's not the most important thing on the planet, but I think you can look at an individual case and it humanizes things for you, and then you start thinking over the larger scale. I thought about that guy because I'm a huge football fan.
Okay.
And rookies always have a harder time making the team, right?
Sure.
Unless you're in the first round. And every year there's several people that were not draft picks, several free agents, rookie free agents that make some teams.
Okay.
The Broncos have always been big on that. The Packers the last couple of years usually have at least one. So this is somebody that wasn't one of the 350 people that was invited to the draft, and yet they ended up having enough talent and making the team. How did they show that talent? Through training camp, through practice, through preseason games.
Sure.
There are no preseason games this year.
Oh.
Training camp has been cut way down, and they're basically doing on air. They're doing run-throughs, walkthroughs. They're doing almost no contact.
Oh.
So if you're a rookie right now,
sure.
Now this rookie pops positive on the COVID test, go home for 10 days. We're making our first round of cuts Sunday night.
Eesh. All right.
You know,
sorry about your dreams.
right? I mean, and that's just one thing. And like I said, I'm not saying football is the be all end all, but for me, knowing how football works, knowing how these young guys are trying to make teams, I really went, wow, this is rough. And you think about all the businesses that are out there that have been shut down or severely limited. You look at something like the bar and restaurant industry, which is brutal anyway. What the statistic is? It like 80% of bars and restaurants go out of business in the first year under the best circumstances. Now, under these circumstances,
let's remove the crowd and see what happens.
Right. So it's rough. I don't know. I don't know where we're going. It's a scary thing.
I think that's the part of the worst part from my point of view is I like to look at metrics, and no metric has been assigned really that stuck that said this is when we're going to change, this is when we're going to shift gears.
Right.
They've attached dates to it with no real reasoning.
Well, and you know what Mark Twain said about statistics, right? There are lies, damn lies, and statistics.
Absolutely, yeah.
And who's compiling the statistics, and do they have what lens are they looking through? It's scary. That's one of the toughest things I have in teaching high school kids right now is with the democratization of the media, everyone has a platform on which to speak, and who can you trust?
Well, that's a tough nut.
Well, and then you look
question.
at the ethics of journalism, and once upon a time, I watched a movie this last year. My wife and I watched a movie called Spotlight, which stars Michael Keaton, which was about
great movie.
The Boston the priest abuse.
Yep.
Great movie. They spent most of their time getting multiple sources. Before they would print that. Right?
Yeah, so try to fact check.
3 verifications.
Yeah.
Okay. That doesn't happen now because there's such an urge because everyone is a media outlet.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to be first. So now it's let's get it out there first and we'll figure out what part of it's true later. And that's a scary thing. You know? And then you have, media outlets with obvious bias and dueling media outlets with obvious bias.
Right.
And you throw that in the mix. And as a kid that's a freshman who probably doesn't want to watch the news anyway, I can see why a lot of kids in younger generation are just kind of saying, I'm not down for that. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I think universally, from my perspective, I stopped really watching because it was a lot of fear-mongering. There was fear-mongering even before the COVID stuff, right? It was just sensationalized stuff because that's what people are interested in.
My wife and I had this conversation a year ago. The evening news, local evening news, it happened to be a Milwaukee channel, but it was like, is there a hidden killer in your child's bedroom? Watch tonight at 10. Like, if it's that important, could you tell me now? Tell me now. Someone's going to kill my child. No, it was, I don't know, a popular child's toy or something that would burst into flames, something along those lines.
Right.
But I mean, talk about using fear to get people to tune in.
Right.
And I guess it's a base human emotion, so people react to it.
Usually.
If you're frightened, look at the number of gun sales over the course of the last 5 months.
Oh, it shot crazy up.
People are afraid. Yeah, I would say there's a correlation there.
I got a buddy just got a truck, and it came with a dealer installed gun safe.
Really?
And I thought, whoa. Dealer installed, like there's the brand, major brand, probably one of the best-selling trucks, right? And I'm like, that they're offering that at the dealership, that's a thing? Yeah. That's where we're at now?
Yeah.
But it's like, this is where you put your piece.
Yeah. It is. It's frightening. It's really frightening. And if you're involved, if you're a creative person, if you are on YouTube or have a podcast or you do acting, you better be careful what you say in public.
Oh yeah,
because they,
one wrong thing taken the wrong way.
People are getting. I'm not defending anybody's position on anything that is questionable, but I believe people grow and learn and change daily. And if you're going into someone's social media feed from 13 years ago,
right,
and using that as a reason to remove them from a job or to cancel them or tell other people not to work with them, 13 years ago, I was a totally different person than I am right now.
Oh, we all were. Yeah.
And so that's a tough deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's scary to me.
Yeah. If you're looking back that far.
Yeah. Well, I as I said, I teach high school, and so I try to, present two sides of an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the people that are worried about COVID, not going away, about it mutating, about people dying, especially people that have compromised immune systems like myself.
Right.
Obviously, I've got some skin in the game there.
Sure.
But nobody has conversations anymore.
No, not often.
Everyone
Well,
wants-
I try.
Yeah. Well,
We're here.
But that's the thing, is that I've been trying to listen to you. I read a book, I can't remember what it was, but they said people listen in two different ways.
Okay.
Some people listen to understand,
Mm-hmm.
and some people listen to respond.
Oh, interesting.
And I've been guilty of this, where someone says something that I disagree with,
Mm-hmm.
and rather than listen to how they're explaining it, I'm like, well, first I'm going to hit him with this, and then I'm going to hit him with this, and then I'm going to bring up this.
Let me get the stats.
Right, exactly. So, and I've done that.
Okay.
I think a lot of people have probably done that, but, really listening to understand
Mm-hmm.
is a different deal. Like, okay, what are you saying?
Mm-hmm.
Am I hearing you correctly? This is what you're saying. And where are you coming from? Why are you saying that?
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, we got people screaming at each other on Facebook because they disagree, and social media, which is supposed to draw us all together, has been
hope.
separating people. But the first time I ran into this, before I got into voiceover,
Mm-hmm.
I had no social media.
Okay.
Zero. Was not
That's
connected.
a good place to be.
Given the fact that there had been a teacher in another state whose social media was their demise because they were
Oh.
interacting inappropriately with students,
Okay.
and like, not for me, not doing that.
Sure.
Married kids, happy with my life, like teaching, want to keep teaching,
Too
no
much
social
risk.
media.
Sure.
Well, then I got into voiceover, and my voiceover mentor said, you really need something.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I don't know why, but Facebook is big for voiceover. There are other
Okay.
people using Instagram.
Sure.
I'm not on Instagram, but Facebook, there are a lot of really good Facebook groups for voiceover, and so Facebook is for middle-aged soccer moms and voiceover people. So I started there, and then I started looking at YouTube a little bit and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But my son is 25 now. When we took him, when he was a freshman in college, so like 7 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
we take him to lacrosse, drive him to lacrosse, unload him, decide we're going to take him out for lunch. So he hops back in my truck, and we go out to lunch, and we're sitting there eating, and his little brother and sister are with us, and we're a family, and we're having conversations, and God, it's got to be exciting for you, Jake. What do you think you're going to do? How are you going to get along with your roommate? What, classes are you going to take? And we're having a conversation as a family over lunch.
Sure.
There was a group of 6 young ladies who were all college age over here, and they were all going out to lunch together. And they were all simultaneously staring at their own phones. There was no conversation going on. And that was one of the first parts where I thought, this has got, there's a dark edge to it.
Huge.
And now we hear ideas like, the echo chamber.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people aren't really looking to find information. They're looking to support their
Sure.
previously held bias.
Reinforce what they
Right,
already believe.
exactly.
Sure.
And so they only follow people, they only read posts from people that already agree with them,
Mm-hmm.
not other people that are out there.
Sure.
And I think there's a real danger in that. There's
Huge.
a real danger in us disconnecting. Now, maybe this pandemic will change that, because people will be so starved for human contact that they will put their dang phones away and actually have conversations with people.
Oh, we would hope.
Maybe that will happen.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it can be dangerous. Now, my kids argue with me frequently. My daughter is 19, and she argues with me because she doesn't like to make phone calls.
Okay.
She's a good person. She's a smart person. She has a good personality. She gets along well with people,
Mm-hmm.
but she just doesn't like the phone. She's just like, that's not how we do it.
Her
Yeah,
generation.
right.
Okay.
Her friend group, her kind of age cohort,
Mm-hmm.
and she said that's just not something that I do a lot. And And I'm like, well, I get it, but at some point you're going to have to. So let's work on those skills.
Right.
Even if you're not going to use them a lot, let's work on that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I got a fire extinguisher in my house, even though I'm hoping I'm not going to have to use it on a daily basis, right? I know how to use it in case I need to.
Right.
So let's at least work on that. But things change, and I'm afraid that I'm becoming the grumpy old dude telling kids to get off his phone.
Right.
But
So
in my day, we had a phone, and it
we actually talked to people and had tone. And
had that long cord, and we talked. Yeah, that's not,
my little brother Danny, big brothers, big sisters, we were gonna order a pizza, and I was about to pick up the phone myself, and I was like, wait a second, you call him. So you call, I'll pay. And then I was like, I'm gonna take this step further. You got to ask for 10% off. Whatever they tell you the price is, you say, can you do any better? And because he's very introverted, and I was like, we got to push him a little bit.
how old is he?
At this time, he was probably 17. So I mean, you just got to order pizza and then ask for a deal right after they tell you the price. And he's all like, having a hard time, shaking. He eventually did it, and they said no, like that's the price, right? Because I told him it doesn't matter if they say no.
Right.
Like,
What have you lost?
this is just a challenge, right? For you to actually talk to a person that you don't already know outside of your little 5-person circle.
Right.
And holy shit, that was a stretch for him. But then he got a job at the mall back when people went to malls at some Italian ice cream place or something like that. And he learned that the nicer you are to people, the more tips you get.
Yeah.
And now he becomes a little bit
Yeah.
of an extrovert, where he starts talking with people, offering them suggestions about what Italian ice cream they're going to get, blah blah blah. He learns like, oh wait, if you become a good communicator,
Right.
that can increase the quality of your life.
We had this conversation as well. My daughter was 19, worked as a bartender,
Oh, nice.
and so she realized, hey, you know what? If I can strike up a conversation with a complete stranger who's obviously older than I am, because she was a little neighborhood bar,
Sure.
and
she's
like,
19.
then I get good tips.
Nice.
And then to play that forward, the other day my wife and I were dining at a place in Okachi, and outdoor dining, and the young lady was probably about 19, really bubbly personality, super, on top of things, always there if you need your drink refilled, things like that. And my wife said, make sure you give her a good tip now, because she was nice, and think of her like your daughter, because she...
Right.
So I'm
Funny.
like, okay, I
Got
certainly
it.
gave her a good tip.
Yeah.
So,
No, they're playing the game and they know how, so that's cool.
yeah. Well, and part of that, we're watching this young lady, and I'm like, at first I'm like, oh, she's a little much for me, but it was just who she was.
Sure.
She wasn't putting it on. You could tell.
All right.
And that goes back to kind of what I was saying, being genuine,
Mm-hmm.
organic. Be who you are, and people could. I am honed on that because ninth graders.
Oh.
Especially ninth grade boys, their BS detector is really ratcheted up. Their tolerances are very small,
Sure.
so they know if you're full of garbage or not.
Oh,
They know
funny.
if you know what you're talking about. They know if you're portraying something that you don't personally believe in. They're really, really good about it.
Oh, nice.
So it is. I think that has also helped me develop. Just I am who I am. Some people great, some people not going to like that, but.
Right.
This is what I do. I like working with a variety of people, but I mean, I'm kind of me.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going to do because that's what's worked for me up to this point. So
You teach freshmen?
I teach mostly freshmen. Yeah. So I've been teaching 2 classes. I was teaching a class called American Problems, and
We need another year for this
Yeah.
one.
and freshman government. In our
Okay.
school, government is required for freshmen.
Okay.
Okay, so I've been teaching that for years and years and years. And then American Problems, I had it with, I just was over it. So then I created this other class, Superheroes and Social Issues. So yeah. So my government classes are almost all freshmen. You'll
Okay.
occasionally get a kid transfer in from another school.
Sure.
Or you get a kid that's repeating it, whatever. But 93% are probably
Man.
freshmen. And then the other class is a junior senior level elective
Okay.
course. So yeah, mostly freshmen. My
Junior
wife says it's good that I teach mostly freshmen
Okay.
because I'm smarter than some of them and about as mature as most of them. So,
I was just gonna say, my wife teaches 8th grade. I can't walk down that hallway. I'm just like, you're the future of our country. I'm not impressed.
Well, what I found was 7th graders are squirrels.
Okay.
So there's a lot going on there, but they're still pretty malleable.
Okay.
As they get to be slightly older, that changes. I went from teaching 7th grade for 5 years at Parkview Middle School in Mugwanago.
Mm-hmm.
And in that 5 years, there was only 2 kids I knew on day one I wasn't going to reach.
Oh.
That there was no way.
In 5 years?
In 5 years, there was only 2 kids. I knew I'm not getting through to this kid. Everybody else, and I had varying degrees of success, but
Sure.
everyone else, I knew I had a chance.
Okay.
If I can build rapport with this kid, there's a chance I can win them over. I can get them to pass this class. I can get them to be, a little bit better person.
Mm-hmm.
There was 2 kids I knew, okay, this isn't happening. I do my best. I'm going to offer you the help. Whether you take it is up to you. When I moved back to Watertown and I started teaching seniors,
Mm-hmm.
there was 5 kids in the first class I had that I knew, okay, none of this is going to get through to you. You've made your mind up about me immediately.
Wow.
You already are on your path, And
right.
maybe part of that is just as kids grow up, they figure things out, like, okay, this is what's important to me in 7th grade because there's a whole bunch of stuff and I'm not really sure where I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
And as a senior, okay, now this is what's important, and maybe what I was teaching them didn't fall inside that cone of importance for them.
Sure.
Possibly. But I think it is just kids in 7th grade are still malleable. And in 8th grade, I think they lose a little bit of that.
All right.
As freshmen, they lose a little bit of that
Sure.
until you get to be seniors. And I hope that kids that are seniors have stuff figured out, at least to some degree.
I believe they think they do.
Well,
That's the whole thing, right?
Yeah,
Like you
yeah.
believe that you know everything, and then
Yeah.
you realize like there is no possible way
I s-
that you can know everything.
I say this to kids all the time. I said, don't be like me. When I was 15 or 16, I thought I was a genius, and I thought my parents were idiots.
Right.
By the time I got to be about 25, I realized I wasn't nearly as smart as I thought I was, and my parents weren't nearly as dumb as I thought they were.
Right.
But that's a time and experience thing, it
Yeah.
happens. So,
Dang. That's cool. That's impressive right there.
so
To go off on your own with your business is cool. Steve, how can people find you?
you can go to my website, which is www.steveschleicher, that's SteveSchleicher.com. And you can contact me via email through that website. You can see some of my on-camera stuff that I've done. There are links to Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube. And then you can also listen to any of my voiceover demos.
Nice. That's awesome. You got a good looking website.
Do you like that?
I do. You get your two
The
two genres.
and
right?
that was when the guys that were putting it together said, okay, here's our standard kind of layout, and this is what we do. And I said, can we do this? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I get a lot of bad guy stuff, but I'd also like to get goofy dad kind of stuff, because I think my kids would tell you that's really kind of who I am.
This is Steve.
So a Madison area photographer took those photos, and so we got one where I'm in a leather jacket and it's kind of darker and I look
Yep.
nasty, and the other one I'm more dressed like this, like
Right.
Okay, so yeah, it's
Nice.
the guys that put it together. It's voiceactorwebsites is the name of the company.
Oh,
And they put it together.
that's specific.
Yeah, it is, and if you are in the voiceover industry and you want a website, these are the guys that are the king of the hill. I mean,
All right.
other people do it.
Sure.
You can do your own on Wix, but as far as playability for your demos, because that's a big thing.
Huge.
If you are on a mobile device, because 85% of people are accessing your website on mobile device, and they go to your demo and they push play and nothing happens,
Oh,
or it sends them to another one, they're moving on to the next voice actor. They've had it with you. So these guys make sure that the playability is fantastic. You can update it yourself. It's got, I like the visuals, the way they lay things out, and they run that all past you as you're putting it together, color scheme,
Nice.
format, layout.
Yeah.
So yeah, they did a great job on
yeah.
it.
It's a good looking site. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, this has been we ran some time
Oh
here.
my goodness.
Yeah, right?
Oh, okay.
It's not good.
Okay.
We're all late, right?
Okay.
This has been Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumphant successes of business owners across the land, coming to you remotely, but also through the Sunprey Community Radio Studios, underwritten by Bank of Sunprey. My name is James Kademan, entrepreneur, author, speaker, and helpful coach to small business owners across the country. We have Steve Schleicher here on camera, voice talent, and teacher to awesome students everywhere. Right?
Yes,
or at least locally-ish. If you're listening to this on the web, please like, subscribe, and share, because that's how we get the word out, right?
Excellent.
That's the name of the game. Find us airing on 103.5 Wednesdays at 1 p.m., Sundays at 2 p.m., as well as at sunpraymediacenter.com. Past episodes can be found morning, noon, and night at the podcast link found at drawincustomers.com. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week. I want you to stay awesome, and if you do nothing else, enjoy your business. Steve, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
This has been cool.
It was great. I had a good time.
Did you realize it went this long?
No way. No way.
Yeah.
No way.